that little girl smiling and keep my faith alive. Takes all I got to hold on till tomorrow, and you wanna make it hard. You wanna make it hard on me. Some of the time I'd be understanding. You were supposed to be the friend that I needed when I was down, and now you wanna make it hard. Yeah, you wanna make it hard on me. Maybe if I tried, I could turn the other cheek. Maybe, but how big do I have to be? And you wanna make it hard. Yeah, you wanna make it hard on me. Maybe if I tried, I could turn the other cheek. Maybe, but how big do I have to be? I need someone to put their arm around me, shelter me from all harm. Just as I find something to believe in, you wanna make it hard. You wanna make it hard on me. Yeah, you wanna make it hard. You wanna make it hard on me.
Hello, hello. Test, test. Thank you. What I like about this is it augments my ass. No, men are you right? Well, I'm a guy. Anything will be an upgrade. Hello. Yeah.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to SoulFood Books for our Astrology Night. Yeah, totally. That's like So once a month we gather as a community. Okay. It is noisier. Once a month, we gather as a community to take a look at the overview of. I always like to say when is the appropriate time to duck, and when is the appropriate time to jump, and be able to incorporate all of these incredible opportunities that we have for growth. And the reason that that has really shaped how I look at it is from these two gentlemen before us, because of their insightful and incredibly easily graspable way of looking at the stars and how they affect us. And so tonight we get a chance to hang out with Jeff Drower and Rick Levine. And I also want to take this opportunity to say happy birthday to Mr. Rick Levine. And yeah. And just from a very personal community, family space, thank you for being here. Not only do you help us kind of walk through the world, but you're incredible, and we love you. And thank you for being on this planet and being who you are. So we love you. And I'm going to get off this seat.
Do I get a hug?
Yes, because that's my favorite part, dude.
Hi, Nate. Hi, Nate.
And then thank you, and then we'll do the San Miguel. So I'll just do the usual intro stuff, and then I'll signal Julie and she'll start shoot the San Miguel part. Okay?
Ladies and gentlemen, planets of all ages. Was that you?
Come on up. All right, good evening. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, May. You did a very good job. She's the best. She is. And she's a Taurus, too. And that's all right. That's later this month. Good evening. How many of you are here for your first astrology night? Well, welcome. Thank you. We hope you'll enjoy yourselves and come back and visit us again. What Rick and I are going to do is spend some time talking about the collective astrological patterns that are working in the month of April. We can call this the cosmic weather. It's not about you as an individual, it's about us collectively. So we're going to be talking about that with the perspective that everything is meaningful and usable. After Rick and I do that, we're going to take a little break. That'll be your opportunity to check things out in SoulFood, to chat with one another. And during the break, if you would like us to look at your chart, put your first name, your time, date, and time of birth, date, and place of birth, put it on a piece of paper, drop it on the table there. Somebody had already done so earlier and it got lost. So if you're that person, you can resubmit. We're going to pick 3 names, and then after the break, Rick and I are going to take a look at your charts and do a 4 or 5 minute mini reading on
And
each
remember
one.
here, size doesn't matter. If you use a big piece of paper, it's no insurance that you will get picked.
Obviously, the tall are not favored in this evening's presentation, but we'll do our best to be fair regardless. A couple of announcements before we start. Tomorrow evening, the Washington State Astrological Association will be having its monthly meeting. Alan Oken, a world-famous astrologer, will be lecturing tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Alan is also giving a workshop on Saturday. Is that somebody here from WASA? And who, if you're interested, could you come over here and meet some of the folks from the Washington State Astrological Association to find out more details. Additionally, in our dynamic metaphysical astrological community, on Memorial Day weekend, we're going to have the 27th Annual Northwest Astrology Conference, aka NORWAC. Rick and I will be speaking there, as well as many very well-known astrologers like Stephen Forrest, Rick Tarnas, Rob Hand, Gloria Starr, Phil Sedgwick, lots and lots of them. It's a great event. It's Memorial Day weekend. You can come for the day. You can come for the whole weekend.
Or, in fact, you could come for Saturday night's banquet, and Jeff is the keynote speaker at the Saturday night banquet.
It's just because I cook. They make me cook the meal, and then they let me talk about it a little bit. That's all.
Hopefully not. He may be a Taurus. He can eat.
Right, but I can't cook. But if you'd like to know more about NORWAC, there are some brochures here on the table. And even if you're on the fence or you know someone who might be interested, please pick one up. It is the great annual community event in the world of astrology here in the Seattle area. There's one other event I want to talk to you about before we get going tonight, and that is the seminar that Rick and I are going to be doing from November 5th through November 11th this year in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. This is a location where Rick and I taught last year, loved it so much, found an even better place to teach in this time, and we're going back.
Yeah, it's a 250-year-old authentic Spanish hacienda. This town, San Miguel de Allende, was first, inhabited by the Spanish back in the 1500s, and there are churches there from that period of time that are absolutely stunning. It's a national historic city, and it's a great place to be. It's a very safe place, and it's high desert, and in November, it's going to be magical. It'll be a one-week-long retreat.
And the focus of this is how to survive and prosper in these wild and crazy times. Our goal is going to be to empower every attendee. Some will be total astrology beginners, some will be advanced astrologers, but to empower everyone there with specific information about their charts and collective ideas and community activity that make us, as students and fans of astrology, not the followers of history, but the creators of history. You can find out more about this by clicking on the link on the front page of stariq.com. That's STARIQ.com, or by going to heavenandearthworkshops.com. That's all one word, heavenandearthworkshops.com, where you'll find information about our seminar and some other amazing events.
Right, and this particular event, like Jeff said, we did this in the same location, in the same city a year ago, and everyone who attended, it was just a transformative, magical time. Jeff called it a seminar. It's actually more like a retreat. And although astrology is the background of information, as Jeff said, it's really about personal transformation. You will learn a lot and learn a lot of astrology, but it's not just lecture style. There's a lot of interaction. We'll be doing some experiential work, and it's a really, really fun and exciting time, and we would love to see you there.
Great.
The dates again are
November 5th through 11th, 2011.
Great. All right, let's talk about this crazy month. Now, we met here as we do the first Wednesday of every month, and last month one of the feature events we talked about was Uranus, the shaky, quaky, rocky planet of revolution, not only changing signs by moving back into Aries, but moving into the first sign of the zodiac, initiating a whole new 84-year cycle. Unfortunately, that was the same day as the earthquake in Japan.
Right, and for those of you who were here last month, you know that we put a lot of weight on, the stuff that was going on in the Mideast had already kind of broken loose back in February, and when we were here at the beginning of March, we were saying we ain't seen nothing yet. It's really going to pick up. We don't know exactly what that means or how it'll play out. And certainly a combination of the events in Japan and the new war in the Middle East certainly has upped the ante quite a bit. And that is the beginning of Uranus moving into Aries.
Yeah, this is not only is Uranus in Aries, but the major astrological cycle between now and 2015, about which we'll be talking here in Mexico, at NORWAC, and all sorts of places, as are many of our colleagues, is the fact that Uranus is coming into a tense 90-degree angle with transformational Pluto. It's stage 2 of what broke out in the middle of the 1960s. So we're not going to go into that in detail tonight because we've got another major planetary change, one that's even rarer than Uranus's change of signs that happened 2 days ago.
Well, yeah, Uranus takes 84 years to go around the sun once, and therefore 84 years to go through all the signs in the zodiac. 84 divided by 12 is 7. Uranus spends about 7 years in each sign. Now, every time that Uranus goes around once, the planet Neptune goes around about a half a time. So it takes Neptune 2 Uranus cycles, actually about 165 years, to go around once, which means that Uranus spends 14 years. I'm sorry, thank you. Neptune spends 14 years in each sign. What that means is that 165 years ago, Neptune moved into the sign of Pisces. 2 days ago, Neptune moved into the sign of Pisces again, or for the first time in our lives. And with rhythms these slow, these long-lasting, it's a bit more mysterious. I mean, when you look at Saturn cycles 30 years or Uranus 84 years, it's like we can look back and we can remember, and they're like clockwork almost. But when you get into the slower moving cycles of Neptune and Pluto, they're a little bit trickier to see what they mean by sign. However, the important thing to understand here is that every sign relates to a planet and every planet relates to a sign. The newer planets that were discovered, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, were assigned to signs. Neptune was assigned to Pisces. Neptune has, just a couple of days ago, moved into its home sign of Pisces, where it'll be for about 4 months. On August 4th, it retrogrades back into Aquarius, and then next year, it moves into Pisces again, where it'll stay until March of 2025.
Now, what this means, the slower moving the planet, obviously, the longer lasting the influence, and the more meaningful its transits are. Neptune, the planet of faith, spirituality, imagination, dreams, compassion, entering its spiritual home sign, Pisces, could represent a spiritual revival with a focus on the notion of spirituality as opposed to religion. That is to say, the qualitative experience of touching, caring, and connecting for and with one another, as opposed to the race to heaven by one's own particular religious ladder. So there is an opportunity to take, to a certain extent, what the internet has created on an intellectual level, that global community of the mind may be descending into the collective body of human spirit. We get a taste of these possibilities over the next 4 months, but we get a much more enduring drink of this possibly healing and transformational energy starting again next year. But I want to back up and point out a couple of other things. When Neptune was last in Pisces, it was shortly after Neptune was discovered.
Yes.
And when a planet is discovered, it is considered to enter our consciousness, and different eras of history have been marked by the discovery of the 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Well, 2 things I just wanted to mention briefly about Neptune's entry into Pisces last time around. It was a very significant point in the 1840s of the abolitionist movement here in the United States. And what the abolitionist movement, of course, was specifically related to slavery, but it had a compassionate and spiritual impulse that recognized the humanity of all of us, regardless of race. We have subsequently, hopefully, made advances of abolition of other boundaries based on gender, national origin, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully this time around, Neptune in Pisces is going to bring back or revive some of this compassionate, humanistic idealism. The other thing that's very interesting, and Rick and I were actually talking about it the other day, about an astrologer named Jim Lewis, a brilliant astrologer who's passed away, who we both knew very well. But Jim was saying when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, that was one shoe falling, and that shoe was communism. And that Jim felt that the other shoe that will fall is capitalism. Now, I get that we were all raised in a culture where you think no capitalism or different capitalism equals communism, equals socialism. What I'm suggesting is perhaps we are moving toward a place of overcoming that philosophical divide so that we can draw upon the best elements of independent freedom and collective caring and emerge a new economic paradigm. The Communist Manifesto, which wasn't a document about how to dominate countries and suppress freedom, it was about how to take the weakest among us, how to give labor some power in relationship to capital. We're seeing the issues arising right now in the state of Wisconsin and elsewhere, where huge investments by Koch Industries, by ostensibly those at the top end of the capital side, are using their resources to undermine the labor side. Now, I don't want to get into who's right or wrong here. I really don't know enough about it to have other than my own limited instincts and opinions. But I think what Neptune in Pisces is meant to remind us is whenever you're presented with a divide, oh, it's capitalism or communism, it's left or right, it's men or women, what Neptune in Pisces, I think, offers is the opportunity to look past that divide and to recognize that male, female, capital, labor, black, white, yellow, green, we're all swimming in the same fishbowl.
And I think that fishbowl is really the best image of Pisces. Pisces is just Latin for fish. And you know, the thing about the fish is that the ocean that's flowing through any one fish is the same ocean that's flowing through every fish in the ocean. And we can take the word ocean or sea and move it into another realm and call it the seas of consciousness, because it's the same thing. Jeff, I want to pick up on something you said. I put a chart up here for back in the 1840s, and it was in 1847, 1848, that Neptune moved from Aquarius into Pisces. But interestingly enough, during that period of time, Uranus, like it is now. Remember I said every time Neptune goes around, Uranus goes around twice. So 2 times ago of Uranus's cycle, it was in Aries while Neptune was moving into Pisces like it is now. Interestingly enough, you brought up the Communist Manifesto, and it's fascinating, but the week in 1843, actually, the week that Uranus moved, Uranus now, not Pisces, that Uranus moved from Pisces, Uranus, not Neptune, the week that Uranus moved from Pisces into Aries in 1843, this shows 1844 because I'm in April, but it was earlier in the year. That week was the week that Marx and Engels met. And they only met 3 times. And they met within the first few weeks of Uranus moving into Aries. Uranus, the planet of sudden change, Aries, the planet of freedom, followed up over the years ahead as the Communist Manifesto was written, and then communism took hold over the next decades, actually, as Neptune moved into Pisces and the dream kind of, you know, manifested, if you will.
Yeah, one other thing about the past before we race back into the present is that 1848 was one of the most revolutionary years in history. there were rebellions breaking out in, I think, at least a dozen countries in Europe.
Yes.
And what some of that led to was a transformation of Europe that led to the countries that didn't exist, like Germany and Italy. So we are seeing patterns again that can, through perhaps some scary moments of chaos. For example, in North Africa, in the Middle East, we have no idea what's going to happen in Libya or in Tunisia or in Egypt, and yet something is moving. And that notion of something moving is not only a part of the long-term cycles we're describing, but short-term. This month started with a bang.
One quick thing before we come
Okay,
back to
before
this
you
month,
come back to the
and
bang.
that
It's
is
always
that,
like
well, it's, never mind.
yeah.
You were talking about the tremendous social revolution of the late 1840s that extended through the 1850s. And Jeff also referenced earlier how the upcoming Uranus moving into Aries, squaring Pluto, is playing back on what happened in the mid-1960s when Uranus and Pluto were aligned. Well, in 1849, 1850, 1851, when Neptune was moved into Pisces, Uranus had moved into Aries, Pluto was also in Aries, and it was during that period of that revolution that Uranus and Uranus and Pluto, like they aligned in 1966, that had effect for years before and years after. They were aligned also in 1850 and had effects for years before and years after. Now we can come back to the
All
present.
right. So this month starts with the sun in Aries, the first sign of spring in the northern hemisphere, and the notion of initiation or beginning. Well, as Rick said earlier, every planet has a sign, every sign has a planet, technically called rulership. Mars is the key or ruling planet of Aries. Mars, the planet of aggression, assertion, initiative, punching holes into your reality to break through to a new or different reality. Mars is not only in Aries now, which it entered on the 1st of April, which basically means collective individual patience at traffic lights has been reduced by 24%. On the 3rd of April, we had a new moon. The sun and moon joined together in the sign of Aries. And on that very day, Mars, the warrior planet, the initiator, joined with Uranus, rebellious, revolutionary breakthrough, recently entered Aries. So there is a buzz in the air and a buzz for change. Now, the thing about Aries is, Aries wants change, but it doesn't necessarily know where that change is going to occur, nor how it's necessarily going to occur. But I would suggest that if you want change in your life and don't know where or how to do it, as I often say here, change something. Just change anything, just to get things moving. Now, give it to the Aries.
As an Aries with a pile of planets in Aries, I often like to say, ready, fire, aim. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. All right, however, I have 4 planets in Aries. On the new moon, just a couple of days ago, on the 3rd, we had, this is the chart for April 3rd, and we had Mars, Uranus, the sun and the moon, Jupiter, and Mercury. There were 6 planets clustered in Aries. Now, even though the moon has moved on, we're only left with a mere 5 planets, 2 of them rather heavyweights being Uranus and Jupiter, the fact is that this is, what's the technical word? Shit pile. A metric. No, it's a cluster. It's a lot of planets in one place. And whenever there are that many planets clustered in one sign, you can bet your bottom dollar that it's going to bring out the imagery of that particular sign. And as Jeff said, I said ready, fire, aim. It's, just do something. shoot now, ask questions later. It's the sense, it doesn't always work for the best, always. But all these planets in Aries are basically saying, do something, start, initiate, get it going, and figure out the details or even figure out the direction later. Just take that first step.
Yeah, we have another factor that sort of underscores the complexity of these days, and that's Mercury retrograde.
Oh, yeah, that.
Mercury, the planet of communication, data, and details, goes backwards for 3 weeks at a time, 3 weeks a year, 3 times a year, and represents a greater degree of complexity with communication. Mixed up messages, broken phones, technical difficulties are famously associated with Mercury retrograde. But here's the funny thing. We've got all of these planets racing ahead in Aries. And there's Mercury, the mind, racing backwards in Aries. So it's a very sort of complex time in which one part of us can be motivated to go forward towards love, creativity, projects, learning anything, and one part is like a 15-year-old boy with extra hormones who drank too much and mixed his drinks. There's an element of stupidity in the midst of all of this. But the thing is, you can do something very smart with stupidity. Stupidity can be a great ally. The great ally of stupidity is it can take you in places you didn't even know existed. Once the rational, logical part of your mind is overwhelmed by hormonal, plutonium, or whatever horrifying, excessive, crazy thing is going on, there's a part of us that's off the track. And yet periodically, as this train is wandering backwards, half going off the rails, out the window we get glimpses of brilliance. We get glimpses of the past and looks at the future. Assimilating any of this is likely to be difficult. So this is, I think, typically Aries style, a period of time in which it's important to trust the experience and worry about what it means or what you're going to do with it later.
There are always rhythms within rhythms and more complexities. Now, Jeff pointed out a really important one, and that is while Mars and Uranus and the Moon moving quickly and the Sun and Jupiter are all moving forward in Aries, the sign of moving forward, the sign of blasting ahead, the sign of pioneering, of enterprising, of impulsive, of discovery. All these planets are moving forward, and in a moment I'll animate this, and you can see how in this, Jeff called it, a drugged-out teenager. It's almost like it may be more graceful than that. We got Michael Jackson moonwalking backwards.
That's good.
Through this incredible driving rock song where all the energy is pushing ahead, and yet just kind of oblivious to everything, just kind of moving backwards until April 23rd, at which point Mercury goes, and starts moving with the pack, and moves so quickly that he catches up to the pack and then races ahead of them, as Mercury does. It's the mind. Now, I'll play this animation in a minute so you can see actually how these planets will all move forward at different rates, and Mercury in the midst of it will move back until it's the lingering planet back here, and then it will move forward again. But the other fact that is incredibly potent during this period of time is that opposite all of these planets here in Aries is the heavyweight himself, Saturn. Now, etymologically, Saturn and Satan are the same thing. It's you get what you deserve. Now, if you come from the Judeo-Christian teachings, what you get and what you deserve is usually shit because you were born of original sin, and so the outcome is never really pretty. Theology 101. Astrologically, however, Satan or Saturn is Satan without the negative judgment to start. It's still not easy, but it's you get what you deserve. And we're humans. We have our foibles, we have our problems, and often what we deserve isn't the best. But Saturn rewards the hard work Jeff likes to say Saturn is the planet that says no but means yes. Because when we run into resistance of Saturn, it's often there to help us focus our energy and get it right so we can accomplish it, rather than being an Aries and just impulsively running through whatever and not really taking time to get it right. So we have Saturn here moving opposite, or I should say, all these faster moving planets moving one at a time opposite Saturn, not only throughout the month, but even throughout the next months, because Mercury will retrograde back and then come back into it, and eventually here we'll have Venus moving forward and catch up with the pack. But they all, at this point in time, have to answer with Saturn. Understand that all those planets in Aries, Aries is the planet of I, me, mine. It's unconscious. It's doing things without thinking about the consequences. Meanwhile, Saturn's over here to remind us that there are consequences.
All right, and we can preempt that. Now, I understand that we do have all of this Aries impulsiveness, but regardless of how impulsive we may be as individuals, those of us here tonight are at least not at this moment institutionalized, and therefore...
Some of us are out on an evening release program.
But not at the moment. I'm speaking to the moment. That's how we get these crowds here, you know. They just empty out the hospitals for us for a little soul food juice. But you can work with this intelligently. And what I mean is that Saturn, the planet of boundaries, limits, and hard, cold reality in the relationship side of Libra, is saying, remember, no matter what kind of inferno is burning in you, there's an outer world. There are people, there are institutions, there are physical things out there in the world that are going to be impacted by what you do or what you don't do. And if we act with total blind aggression or impulse, Saturn will, as Rick said, present the hard, cold wall of reality, going, you can't drive 85 miles an hour in a school zone. You can't have 6 girlfriends and expect me to still be your wife and faithful to you. There are all sorts of...
Come on.
Hey, I'm just like that. What can I tell you? That's why we're not married. But...
He's a Taurus.
There are other reasons as well. But, that my wife will attest to. But, the point is that...
Don't I have a say in this?
No, it's your birthday has now become a roast. No, let's not do that. You don't need to roast an Aries. They're already hotter than you are to begin with. But...
I love you too, Jeff.
Thank you. But with Saturn in Libra, and really the best way to do it is not necessarily to sit down with a reliable friend who will give you a reality check on whatever it is you're thinking about or planning on doing it, but be Saturn in Libra for yourself. Libra is air, and air is about breath. That pause to breathe is an antidote to the overhyped impulsiveness of pure fire energy. And if you think, if I stop to take a breath, or if I stop to consider that this flame will go out, you're probably wrong, because fire needs air. If you're going to keep the flame going, it's going to require ongoing oxygenation. That oxygenation is your own reason, it's the participation of other people, and it's your own willingness to take a breath and frame what you're seeing in a context larger than the second that you're in. So Saturn can really be your ally here. And in traditional astrology, Saturn was exalted in Libra, meaning that the planet of rules, boundaries, limits, and conditions works well. It's healthy in the sign of relationship or negotiation. This is a Satan that you can talk to. This is one in which there are not rigid rules. Everything is relative and up for negotiation.
Made me think of the Cake song, Satan is My Motor. Do you know
Right.
that song?
Right.
Okay. What I'd like to do before we move to the next astrology topic is just quickly run through the animation here so you can watch Mercury as it, day by day, moves backwards. You see here the moon's moving on into Taurus. Mercury is retrograding. We're now on April 8th. Now the Sun and Mercury, have changed places, meaning that the Sun is ahead, Mercury's backed up. Now Mercury's backed up through Jupiter. It keeps moving. All the other planets are moving forward. Notice Venus now moving forward because it moves into Aries
The 20th.
on the 20th. But let's just back up here, and you can see Mercury now lining up with Mars as it backs up across Mars, and it backs up, and there Venus moves into Aries, and on the 23rd is when Mercury stops or finishes its retrograde to turn around, and as it moves direct again, it starts off slowly, but Venus doesn't quite catch up to it. The moon, it's now a month later. The moon has come around an entire moon cycle, and now Mercury's moving forward, and as it does over May, you can see how it will begin to get speed and then move ahead on through and eventually past the Sun. So, okay, we're back to where we are.
If the
Was that helpful? Did you see how that Mercury actually looks like it moves backwards against the other planets? It's not really moving backwards. It's like that train in the track right next to you. You're going faster than it, so it looks like it's moving backwards, and the other planets are just have a different perspective. They're out further.
There's a shift in energy every month when the Sun changes signs around the 20th. Some months is as late as the 23rd, some as early as the 19th. And this month we've got a couple of indicators that once we get into the second half of April, the fiery inferno of all of this Aries energy begins to cool as we become a bit more reflective. And the first player in that is the full moon on the 17th of the month. Every month, as Rick says, every month there's a full moon when the will, as represented by the Sun, is countered by its emotional opposite. The will of the Sun in Aries is I am. Well, the moon in Libra is, oh, you are. Libra, the relationship sign, opposes Aries to make us more aware of the I-thou relationship, of that movement across the plane of experience from one's own self-needs, desires, to working and interacting with someone else. So the full moon is likely to raise some relationship issues, or in the clearest, most positive sense, bring about some emotional objectivity to balance out all the fiery intuition of Aries. Then on the 20th.
Wait, can you stay
yeah,
with that there
sure.
just for a
Go ahead.
second?
Yeah.
Because not only do we have the moon, the full moon in Libra, but we also have Saturn
Right.
in Libra.
Opposing
and,
Mars.
And Mars during that full moon period, Mars becomes the first planet, at least in that week,
Right.
that then moves opposite Saturn. Another dance of I and thou, to misquote Martin Buber, I and thou. It's me and you. It's about us and them. It's about that Aries-Libra balance. And so that becomes another piece of getting ready for that shift.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
good point. The fact that astrology's traditionally most difficult planets, Mars and Saturn, oppose one another.
Hot
which is
Mars,
a
cold Saturn.
Right, which is a
the
tradition.
gas and the brake.
Right. They oppose one another at that full moon, tends to ratchet up the tension in relationships, but offers the capacity to alchemically form something that will last, something that will endure. The flame, the fire, the spark, the initiation of Mars in Aries has the capacity, if it's not stopped by resistance of Saturn, to be given a container or form upon which we can build. Then on the 20th, the Sun moves into Taurus. Taurus is not exactly antithetical to Aries, but almost. Taurus is, I am here and I don't want to move. Taurus is the Garden of Eden that follows Aries' bloody birth into existence. Or Taurus is the resting point after Aries has used up all the gas and the car is on the side of the road not moving. Then it's time to just be a Taurus, and I always say this, since I am a Taurus, I'm authorized to say it is the sign of fat, dumb, and happy.
Of which Jeff claims he's only 2 of 3 of those at any given time.
At any given time.
I like to think of Taurus as Newton's third law, which is an object at rest tends to stay at rest.
Right.
It's inertia. No, I mean, it really is. Or an object in motion Because once a Taurus gets going, try to stop them.
Right.
I mean,
bad,
you know.
Bad. We're like bulls on roller skates. Not very
Oh,
elegant.
there's a pretty picture.
Yeah. But we have an interesting paradox.
Bulls on roller
although the
skates.
sun entering Taurus basically represents a kind of slowing down and coming to a place where we evaluate the stuff, our values, our material resources, that Aries really doesn't have to be concerned with. However, on that very same day, Taurus's Kia ruling planet Venus fires into Aries, which is really kind of confusing. Just as the will, the ego, the I, as represented by the sun, is beginning to grasp the possibility that we can be okay just by being here, the Taurus sun's agent, Venus in Aries, is pushing it and shoving it to make things happen fast. So Rick, I think that's kind of a confusing thing to have the sun go into Taurus, slow down, be practical, while Venus enters Aries and says, oh, what the hell, we're all going to die. I'm going to have fun now. Who cares how much it costs?
Yeah, it really is a paradox. I mean, the sun moving into Taurus, and I don't know if you said this, because I wasn't listening for a moment. But Venus is Taurus's Kia ruling planet.
I heard that.
Oh, okay. So the fact that Venus is moving into Aries certainly fires things up, but that's still only one part of the picture, because as soon as Venus flips that switch and moves into Aries, as soon as she's in Aries, she's in the realm of Uranus, because only a couple of days later, Venus conjuncts or joins Uranus at 2 degrees of Aries. And so it's not just Venus moving into Aries. We have the sun in Taurus, feet on the ground. I'm finally here. I can take a deep breath, even though in Aries I've been thinking about breathing. The breathing I've been doing has been Kundalini, fire-breathing dragon. And then the sun moves into Taurus, and I go, and just a couple days later, Venus is there like kicking the whole thing back up again.
Yeah, and you get fabulously attracted to some robot or electronic device. and a
Wait,
new,
Jeff, you are attracted to every electronic device.
But Venus, the planet of love, is looking for new inspiration when she enters Aries. And joining with Uranus, the planet of weird, strange, out of the box, can have to do with attraction to people and things which don't fit your normal aesthetic model. And quite frankly, I think that all the issues about same-sex marriage are going to fade into the background when we get this human cyborg mating cycle that may be starting.
Everything in perspective.
Everything is relative. So traditional astrology says Venus is uncomfortable in Aries because Venus, the principle of love, pleasure, and self-worth, works well with a little rest. And yet Venus in Aries is, I want what I want right now. And even if I get what I want right now, once it's out of my sight, it'll be like I didn't even get it. Because Aries is about living in the moment. Venus is about love, pleasure, and approval. And it means that love, pleasure, and approval has a very short shelf life.
Yes, the short attention span theater.
Right. Now, that's great if you're playing and having fun. Fine, depending upon whatever your circumstances are. However, what it also suggests is in the area of self-worth, we can all be a little bit Aries-like, like those puppies, you know, the one who pushes the other puppies out of the way to get in the window to make sure that you're going to get this puppy. So there's a little bit of that sort of, I even think Venus in Aries can bring out even more of that socially hungry behavior for immediate recognition and immediate response than all of these other planets.
Yeah. I mean, no, we're talking here costume change. You know, we're talking Venus in Aries, Venus in Pisces, you know, where she is until the 19th or 20th. I mean, this is Venus wearing, you know, furry boots and Angora.
Oh, in Pisces?
Yeah, in Pisces, there's a softness. There's a...
Think of prostitutes in pastel. And you get a good idea of what Venus in Pisces is. That's the higher level of expression. Just kidding.
All right. However, as Venus moves into Aries, she changes in her Angora fur and mohair sweater for leather. and a sword, you know. And I mean, we're talking here. We're talking here about whether you're man or woman, doesn't matter. But it's talking about a sensibility that knows what it wants and will do what it needs to do to get it, as opposed to Pisces that'll be compassionate and
listening, right?
yeah, whatever you just said.
Yeah, and one of the risks, I mean, again, if you're looking for aesthetic breakthrough, relationship breakthrough in terms of your own sense of self-worth, the new forms of pleasure, great. Venus conjoined Uranus in Aries is your ticket to that brave new world of excitement and experience. But it can also mean, obviously, to be careful about where you invest your heart and your money. Because not only do we have the impulsiveness of Aries, what looks good at night doesn't necessarily look so good the next morning or the next day, but a week later, Venus forms a square to Pluto, or as Rick likes to call him, the cleaner. Pluto,
Or as Jeff likes to call him, punishing Pluto.
sometimes punishing, sometimes pleasing, but often at a very high price. And Venus coming to square Pluto means that there's a higher level of accountability and awareness for where we've spent our money, where we've spent our heart, where we've spent our times of pleasure. What that means is if the sudden attraction, whether it be to a human or an activity or a style of dress or an art form, that if it's the right one, when Venus squares Pluto, you may be called upon to double up your investment. And if it's something, someone really worthwhile, then it's worth investing. But if not, boom, you'll get dumped or
Yeah,
dumped it.
I think, Jeff, you're onto something important here, but putting it into perspective or into context, we also have on the 23rd, we have Mercury turns direct.
Right.
And Mercury makes its station, meaning from going backwards, retrograde, to direct, at a degree where it's exactly
Right.
opposite Saturn.
Wow.
So what happens here is that around the sun moves into Taurus, we kind of get, more stabilized. Venus moves into Aries and lines up with Uranus, and we kind of know what we want, and we're willing to take a risk and break out of it, but we may not be able to rationalize it, or we may run into some sort of, obstacle here of having to prove what we really want is really worth it. And then, as Venus moves forward and makes that square here with Pluto, what's happening also is that Mercury is still opposite Saturn, and we're getting a first wave here because Venus is back at the degree of Pluto, 6-7 degrees. It's coming into conjuncting or moving toward all these other planets here that are opposite Saturn, which is still retrograding. And so this square, even though the square between Saturn and Pluto is already passed, we're getting a replay here of this energy that will be with us through the summer when Uranus moves closely to squaring Pluto, and has been with us all the way since 2008 and will be with us all the way through 2015. I think the end of April is a buzz period of time. It's not easy, but we do get one saving grace, and that is the sun in stabilizing Taurus is making a harmonious trine with Pluto. It's picking up on some nice, easy sextiles here, from Pisces. And I think what happens is that if we're willing to go deep, if we're willing to go to Pluto's realm and give it all up, or the ego giving up what it thinks it's attached to, then this dynamic transition may not, I don't want to say it may not be easy, it may not be as hard, because I don't think it'll be easy, but it'll be productive, and I think that's what's more important here.
Yeah, Rick picked up on a very good principle, as he often does, which is to point out where faster moving short cycles are triggering slower moving, longer lasting, deeper and more meaningful cycles. Every time that happens, you get in a short window of view of what would be a wall of glass. You can see much wider. But, and for those of you who aren't technically aware, Rick used terms like trine and sextile. These are harmonious angles between planets that represents an easy or favorable flow between them. Those are generally marked by the blue family of lines, and the red lines represent the places of challenge or tension or dynamism. But Rick, what I was also thinking here, and that's quite amazing, that we have a Mars-Saturn opposition at the full moon, and we get a Mercury-Saturn opposition when Mercury turns direct, meaning that Saturn, the mature, the responsible, it's the catcher in the rye.
Yeah, no, it is.
You
It
know,
absolutely is during this period of time.
What that Saturn then represents in a positive sense is something mature, rational, fair, that's sort of there to catch us or remind us when we've gone too far. But I think also what these patterns represent at the end of the month is a review and a renewal of any meaningful commitment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That if, that's one thing Venus in Aries does. You know, can I renew this relationship? Can I renew this pleasure? But with all of this other stuff going on at the same time, it really feels like those of us, and you know, most of us do, who want to bump along in life with the things that work without reviewing, that if we don't, or if we're unwilling to discuss an adequate relationship or a friendship or a decent job, if we're unwilling to discuss it, then it won't necessarily stay adequate or decent or okay. There's a reinvestment or review that is your best assurance of having the good things continue. And as Rick pointed out, Pluto, the planet of depth and transformation in a harmonious trine with the Taurus sun, also brings in a wealth of good sense that's able to combine the Taurian simplicity of life with the depth of Pluto to, I think, give us a good sense of proportion and values.
You know, I just want to say, just want to come back to, we're here now at the end of the month, the 26th. We still have 5 planets in Aries. I mean, we can talk about all this other stuff, but, you know, for a sign with no staying power,
Right.
damn, those
Right.
planets are still there. Mercury's retrograde. Normally, Mercury whizzes through a sign in 3 weeks or so, but Mercury starts off the month in Aries, it ends the month in Aries. Jupiter and Uranus the same. Mars moves into Aries, and it's in Aries pretty much the whole month. And Venus moves into Aries, later in the month, but it almost moves into Aries to pick up on the sun's leaving into Taurus. And so even with all this other stuff cooking, even after the sun moves into Taurus, and even as we get through the end of the month, and even as the moon at the very end of the month comes back into Aries, there's 6 planets in Aries again, because the moon is back in Aries, even though the new moon isn't until next month. We won't talk about it tonight. But the fact is that the moon is already picking up on these planets again at the end of the month. Wow, rock and roll.
The great,
City's on fire.
the great
Yell
gift,
fire.
the great gift of Aries is that it's the sign of seeds. It's the sign of beginning. If you could have a seed that grew anything, what would that seed be? And if you knew what that seed was, where would you plant it and what would you feed it to make it grow? Aries represents the renewal of the seed, all of the impulse for life, for a fresh start. And so in spite of the fact, or in addition to the fact, that there are some weird things going on in the world, there is an incredible power of renewal this month. And as Rick pointed out, unlike probably any month we've seen in a decade or more.
And look how the month goes out. The last day of the month,
Right.
we have Mars catching up to Jupiter. I mean, this is an unstoppable party at best.
Enterprise, adventure.
But it's also a strongly opinionated movement, Jupiter, with the god of war, pumping energy into it. Now, good news, bad news, we don't know astrologically, or usually things are both. But when Mars fires its energy into Jupiter, we can rest assured that something happens. And it's excitement, it's exuberance, it's energy, it's optimism. For us individually, not culturally, which we will see culturally, but for us individually, we need to pay attention, because it's easy to exhaust ourselves or to commit for more than we can deliver. Get so excited about something with that Mars and Jupiter together, that we say yes when we really mean that's a stupid idea. Or maybe, or let me think about it. Again, it comes back to what Jeff was saying earlier, and that is it's not just breathing, but it's also sometimes not only the inhalation of oxygen that fires the system, but sometimes the pause to allow it to integrate. The breath isn't always about fuel. Sometimes it's about time and space.
Right. Good point, because that's the antidote to Aries. Or the balance, or to make it healthy. The thing with Aries is everything is right up here in your face, which can be exciting, but also panicky. And taking those moments of breath, of time out, of having a cup of coffee, whatever it is not a way to slow down your progress, but to assure your likelihood of reaching your goal. We're going to take a 10-minute break. If you'd like to be included into our regular lottery here, please put your birth information on a piece of paper, drop it on the table. We'll see you in 10.
And also, before we break, can I have your attention just for a second? I'd just like to remind you, all of us, that SoulFood generates its ability to stay alive by what you eat, drink, or buy. Now
and the coins they find in the couches. Don't forget that.
So Jeff and I happily donate our time here because we are members of this community and we're pleased to be a part of it. But in order for you to be a part of it, for it to stay here, to be for here for you, please, if you're thinking about buying someone a gift, look around here. Maybe you can buy it here and spend your money where it matters. It's called voting economically. So, thank you. Yes, that's it. We'll see you back here in about 10 minutes.
The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. I am following the river down the highway through the cradle of the Civil War. I'm going to Graceland, Graceland, to Memphis, Tennessee. I'm going to Graceland. Poor boys and pilgrims with families, and we are going to Graceland. My traveling companion is 9 years old. He is the child of my first marriage. But I've reason to believe we both will be received in Graceland. She comes back to tell me she's gone, as if I didn't know that, as if I didn't know my own bed. As if I'd never noticed the way she brushed her hair from her forehead. And she said, losing love is like a window in your heart. Everybody sees you're blown apart. everybody sees the wind blow. I'm going to Graceland, Memphis, Tennessee. I'm going to Graceland. Poor boys and pilgrims with families, and we are going to Graceland. Am I traveling companions or ghosts in empty sockets? I'm looking at ghosts and empties. But I've reason to believe we all will be received in Graceland. There is a girl in New York City who calls herself a human trampoline. Sometimes when I'm falling, flying, or tumbling in turmoil, I say, whoa, so this is what she means. She means we're bouncing into Graceland. And I see losing love is like a window in your heart. Well, everybody sees you're blown apart. Everybody feels the wind blow. Ooh, in Graceland, in Graceland. I'm going to Graceland. For reasons I cannot explain, there's some part of me wants to see Graceland. And I may be obliged to defend every love, every ending, or maybe there's no obligations now. Maybe I'm a reason to believe we all will be received in Graceland. Oh, in Graceland, in Graceland, in Graceland. I'm going to Graceland. Joseph's face was black as night. The pale yellow moon shone in his eyes. His path was marked by the stars in the southern hemisphere, and he walked his days under Africa's skies. This is the story of how we begin to remember. This is the powerful pulsing of love in the vein. After the dream of falling and calling your name out, these are the roots of rhythm, and the roots of rhythm remain. In early memory, mission music was ringing around my nursery door. I said, take this child, Lord, from Tucson, Arizona. Give her the wings to fly through harmony, and she won't bother you no more. This is the story of how we begin to remember. This is the powerful pulsing of love in the vein. After the dream of falling and calling your name out, these are the roots of rhythm, and the roots of rhythm remain. Ta ba boom ba boom ba oh. Ta ba boom ba boom ba oh. Ta ba boom ba boom ba oh. Joseph's face was as black as the night, and the pale yellow moon shone in his eyes. His path was marked by the stars in the southern hemisphere, and he walked the length of his days under African skies. A long time ago, yeah, before you was born, dude, when I was still single and life was great, I held this job as a traveling salesman that kept me moving from state to state. Well, I'm standing on the corner of Lafayette, state of Louisiana, wondering where a city boy could go to get a little conversation, drink a little red wine, catch a little bit of those Cajun girls dancing the Zydeco. Along come a young girl, she's pretty as a prayer book, sweet as an apple on Christmas Day. I said, good gracious, can this be my luck? If that's my prayer book, Lord, let us pray. Well, I'm standing on the corner of Lafayette, state of Louisiana, wondering what a city boy could do to get her in a conversation, maybe drink a little red wine, dance to the music of Clifton Chenier, the king of the bayou. That's why. Well, that was your mother, that was your father, before you was born, dude, when life was great. You are the burden of my generation. I sure do love you, but let's get that straight. Well, I'm standing on the corner of Lafayette, across the street from the Public, heading down to the Lone Star Cafe. Maybe get a little conversation, drink a little red wine, standing in the shadow of Clifton Chenier, dancing the night away. She's a rich girl, she don't try to hide it. Diamonds on the soles of her shoes. He's a poor boy, empty as a pocket, empty as a pocket with nothing to lose. Sing ta-na-na, ta-na-na-na. She got diamonds on the soles of her shoes. Ta-na-na, ta-na-na-na. She got diamonds on the soles of her shoes. 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 People say she's crazy, she got diamonds on the soles of her shoes. Well, that's one way to lose these walking blues. Diamonds on the soles of your shoes. She was physically forgotten, but then she slipped into my pocket with my car keys. She said, "You've taken me for granted because I please you, wearing these diamonds." And I could say, ooh, as if everybody knows what I'm talking about, as if everybody here would know exactly what I was talking about. I'm talking about diamonds on the soles of her shoes. She makes the sign of a teaspoon, he makes the sign of a wave. The poor boy changes clothes and he puts on aftershave to compensate for his ordinary shoes. And she said, "Honey, take me dancing," but they ended up by sleeping in a doorway by the bodegas and the lights on over Broadway, wearing diamonds on the soles of their shoes. And I could say, ooh, and everybody here would know what I was talking about. I mean, everybody here would know exactly what I was talking about. I'm talking about diamonds. People say I'm crazy, I got diamonds on the soles of my shoes, yeah. Well, that's one way to lose these walking blues. Diamonds on the soles of my shoes. Ta-na-na-na, 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 ta-na-na-na. walks down the street, he says, why am I soft in the middle now? Why am I soft in the middle? The rest of my life is so hard. I need a photo opportunity. I want a shot of redemption. Don't want to end up a cartoon in a cartoon graveyard. Bone digger, dogs in the moonlight. Far away, my well-lit door. Mr. Beer Melly, get these mutts away from me, you know. I don't find this stuff amusing anymore. If you'll be my bodyguard, I can be your long-lost pal. I can call you Betty, and Betty, when you call me, you can call me out. A man walks down the street, he says, why am I short of attention? Got a short little span of attention, and oh, my nights are so long. Where's my wife and family? What if I die here? Who'll be my role model now that my role model is gone, gone? He ducked back down the alley with some roly-poly little bat-faced girl. All along, there were incidents and accidents. There were hints and allegations. If you'll be my bodyguard, I can be your long-lost pal. I can call you Betty, and Betty, when you call me, you can call me out, call me out.
Hello. All right. All right, round two. So the first name we're pulling out of the hat is for the brand new black Lexus. We have Judy. 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 Judy.
As Rick often points out, we do this as a demonstration of astrology at work in an individual's chart. We are using your chart to demonstrate astrology. Any damage that we do to your life or your psyche is incidental and for which we are not responsible.
Yeah, so this is not about you, it's about us. Yeah, you know, it's like it's the compassionate part of us. You drop something.
We all love
No.
Judy, by the way.
We do? Okay. I've just been informed that we all love Judy.
Okay.
Some of us just don't remember. Okay. So we have Judy with the sun in Gemini and the moon in Pisces. Let's add the aspects to the moon, aspect points. And we do that, and there we go. All right, so the first thing that I notice is that the sun at 9 degrees of Gemini and the moon at 10 degrees of Pisces and Neptune at 10 degrees of Libra form this pattern of a square between the sun and the moon, a trine between moon and Neptune, and this green line is a quincunx, which is an aspect of adjustment and between the moon and Neptune. And in some ways what we have here is a person who is an airy, intellectual, mental Gemini who has a strong either artistic, fantasy, spiritual, imaginal lean with Neptune involved. And the moon in Pisces in some ways reinforces that dreaminess and the fantasy. but it's almost like there's always an argument between the mental, the intellectual, the informational side of the sun in Gemini, which wants data, information, facts, whether they're true or not, but wants data, whereas the moon just wants the impressions. So that's my first sense. Does that make a little sense to you? Not just some sense, totally. Totally.
Another take is, I noticed, that, as Rick pointed out, the sun and the moon are at right angles with one another. That's called a square, and basically represents the fundamental contrast that Rick described between the intellectual airiness of Gemini and the emotional sensitivity of Pisces. However, square, or making a right angle to that sun, is Mars, the aggressor, and Mars is also opposite the moon. So there is what we call a T-square. 3 planets forming a T in a tense relationship, one that involves the struggle planet Mars. And this does not look like somebody was born into the easiest and friendliest environment. Several reasons. When Mars, the warrior planet, is hooked up with the moon of home, family, mom, and feeling, there's pressure, there's stress, there's some challenge. And what's rising? The rising is how you adapt to the environment. She's got Scorpio rising. Why would you bother putting on your Scorpio rising fire suit to defend yourself against the toxicity of the environment if it was a perfectly awake and open environment? And what I get in this chart, this is the western side of the chart. The sun is in the 8th house of other people's needs, feelings, responses. There's an extraordinary, I think, amount of, all right, who can hurt me here? Who's going to do what here? There's a lot of, I think, of measuring and watching about what's coming in from the outside, which at its best is alertness and the capacity to handle emergencies and crises. What I'm wondering is how that works when things are smooth and easy. That would seem to be even more challenging. And that was totally wrong. Totally. Thank you. All right. Okay. I mean, I wasn't worried the world situation. Right. Families stay together and everybody. Right. I mean, there's obviously tension here and there, but it wasn't like a bad thing. No, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it has to be an environment. Not has to be, but Mars Moon usually means an environment where you got to be on your toes. Maybe people are active, they're dynamic, they're busy, they're moving, but it's an environment that demands a kind of being awake. Sometimes it's stressful, often it is. In your case, it wasn't great. So much for that.
It almost seems to me that there's a gentle fierceness in this chart, or a fierce gentleness. I'm not sure which way that works, but it seems like the two of them are there together, and whether it was early childhood difficulty or whatever the situation is, in some way there's something, it was an instigator that gave you that sense of fierceness, even though there's an artistic, imaginative, spiritual lean. There's a part of you that is also, I think, able to pull in focus and do what you need to do so that you're not vulnerable. Because there's a high level of vulnerability in this chart. I mean, the moon is trine to both Venus and Mercury, but Venus in particular. There's a lot of integration. There's a lot of buzz here in the chart that really stirs things up, and it may be that there's enough movement of the trines and sextiles that even the pressure and the stress is relieved, so that what Jeff said may be there, but it may not be a big deal because you learn to move with it or work with it. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, stuff happened, but it wasn't like I was born into a rough situation.
Good.
Life had its moments.
Good, thanks. What we have going up is Uranus in early Aries is coming to a square, a 90-degree angle to your Mercury. And what that means is Pluto opposed your Mercury, 3 years ago?
Yeah, 2-3 years ago.
So some deep transformation in thinking, perception, or worldview that might have involved, at its best, the depth of interest, at its worst, some kind of struggle with an old perspective that had to go, there's a new one coming up. I mean, there's an awakening for travel, writing, learning, teaching. Your Mercury is going to be stimulated considerably over the next
Yeah,
year.
right on the edge of it. Some whole new course of either action, thought, ideas, whatever. Something's new. I think you're on the edge of something new.
I kind of started something really new spiritually like 2 years ago.
Okay.
So it's probably similar to that.
Well, that may take you off in a direction that is different than what you had thought it would.
How
for
are
example.
you at asking other people for what you want?
I've been getting better.
But
That means not good. No. Not kidding.
I know there's sort of things in there that kind of point to me thinking I have to do everything myself.
that could be the strong Mars.
And, well, I think the nose, I think, never.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's been on my radar for several years. I'm really consciously trying to cultivate that, being really asking.
Right. Great. Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Next, Jamie.
Jamie?
Jesus, Jamie.
Thank you. Don't you?
What happened is that when you were born, planets forgot to be here, 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 or here.
Well, Jamie doesn't need them. She can do her ritual magic in a broom closet if she has to. I mean, there's a lot of power in this chart. Not only are you a Scorpio, but you have Saturn, the planet of hard, cold reality, join Mercury in Scorpio, which the positive side is an incredibly deep, mysteriously oriented mind, and I suppose the challenging side is how the hell do you communicate what's in your head in a way that other people can understand or be comfortable?
The Sun in Scorpio conjunct Pluto.
Right.
Powerhouse. Mercury in Saturn. I don't say a lot, but when I do, people listen. Because what I say is real, or maybe they argue with it, but there's a reality to, it's the say what you mean and mean what you say.
That's Saturn, the planet of reality, next to Mercury, the planet of communication.
Then we have Venus lined up with Uranus, which we were talking about a little earlier, because Venus is moving into Aries now and lining up with Uranus. And this is the, part of what you like and don't like that you probably don't want us talking about in a group. It's the part of you that's different, that's eccentric, that's quirky, that's kinky, and I don't mean sexually, I mean what you like is other than normal. My daughter has Venus lined up with Uranus exactly, and I can go into a shop with her and walk around and go to the front of the store and wait for her to bring exactly what I know she's going to bring to the front of the store. She has good taste. But she'll always bring the weirdest damn thing in the store, whatever the strangest thing is, because Venus, the planet of attraction and desire and like, is lined up with Uranus, the planet of other than normal, out of the box, different. And then we have all these planets in Capricorn that kind of give you more stability and steadiness, self-reliance. But what intrigues me is how this Sagittarius rising, I don't know you well, but I almost feel like you have that late degree of Scorpio rising rather than a Sag rising, but I don't know that for sure. But what intrigues me is with all these planets here in the 12th house, which is the house of secrets, and all the planets in Scorpio, and the Venus-Uranus conjunction, that people don't necessarily, you don't necessarily tell everybody everything. In fact, you don't necessarily tell anybody anything unless you feel like you're ready to tell them, whatever that means. I mean, there's a part of you that looks like you can be very upfront and engaging and Sagittarianly, interactive, and yet there's a part of you that holds on to stuff that's yours. She'd say very spot on, but she's secretive and she doesn't want to. No.
And what Rick was talking about with the ascendant or the rising sign is that we have this contrast with Jamie of the secretive, scorpionic, Plutonian, 12th house hidden, Saturn, Mercury conjunction stuff, and the more overtly expressive Sagittarius stuff. Now on points, Scorpio wins. Scorpio just has more points than Sag.
But not more than Capricorn almost. I mean, the moon and Jupiter and Mars in Capricorn, there's a lot of points there.
Right, but I think Capricorn's more like Scorpio. It's a sign of control.
Yeah.
Well, here's an interesting thing. If somebody has Venus conjoined, if you have Uranus in the first house, you feel different. Now, different can be good, but it often feels like other people see me as different, which isn't easy, or I'm weird, or I could metamorphose in an instant.
I have Uranus in the first house.
I rest my case. And yet, what's around it, Capricorn and Scorpio are two of the most
Contains
controlling
it, yeah.
signs of the zodiac. And I'm not saying you're trying to control other people because these are in your segments of the chart. So it's almost like there's a psychedelic sandwich with LSD and kaleidoscopic colors and a freakazoid show of high level of
Where can we get
and
this?
excitement wrapped up in two crusty old pieces of pumpernickel that sort of hide it. So it's a very interesting.
Your life must be rocking right now on some level because Uranus has Jupiter, all those planets in Aries are in fact trining, harmonizing with your ascendant. Uranus just moved into Aries, and over the next weeks, months through this year, and Jupiter is harmonizing with the Venus and Uranus. This is like a little bit of rock and roll. Now, granted, those Aries planets are also squaring the Capricorn, so there's a part of you that may be freaking out and going, I don't want to, I shouldn't, I can't, I won't, whatever. But I think that the action here, the fire sign theater wins here.
And it's
So it's
interesting.
cool, good times. I mean, or at least if you're willing to roll with it.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. You're sorry. No, you're sorry.
You're sorry. Okay. These are two charts in a row in which we saw the south node and moon, the Achilles heel, the old karmic pattern we turn to again and again, close to the ascendant, that's the midpoint, and the north node, a point of growth or integration, the dragon's head, in Taurus at the other side of the chart. And what sort of that means is, although delving into yourself, which is what Scorpio likes to do, let me delve into something even if I have to destroy it to figure it out, that instead of sort of eviscerating yourselves to figure out what you're made of so that you work in the world, I think Taurus, north node near the 7th house, says, take me as I am. I don't care how weird I am, how strange I am, how inscrutable I am to myself. There is allowing other people to accept you and love you and appreciate you without the depth of analysis or complication that is self-imposed can be a nice, healthy balancing point, I think, in both of your lives. Thank you for doing that.
No, but send me an email,
Yes.
and
Well,
I'll send you one. Do you have my card, or can you get a hold of me?
If the north node of the moon is the cutting edge, if it's the growth point, moving
Send
out
me
of
your
the
regular
torturous
email
scorpionic
address on Facebook.
experience to something simpler is part of what it's about. Okay, we got
Yeah,
one more?
one more.
Thank you for letting me expose whoever's chart you really gave us to look at. 'Cause this
Nicholas.
person would never give us.
Nicholas.
Oh, we got a ringer in the house. Okay, we got to do good astrology on this guy. He knows a few things. Gonna change? Yeah.
4 planets in Gemini. Oh, no, that's 3 planets in Gemini, and Saturn is a wannabe. But that Saturn's hanging out in Taurus. Saturn opposite Jupiter,
Yeah.
as it is now.
Well, Saturn and Jupiter are opposites. They're opposites. Jupiter's expansion, Saturn is contraction. And I love the humanistic school of astrology in France used to call Saturn and Jupiter socio-culturel, meaning socio-cultural. They're planets that are impersonal but have to do with where we fit in society, where we fit into the culture, where the sun, the moon, and the inner planets are more about me and my taste and my actions and doing things, Jupiter and Saturn have a great deal to do with what does that mean in terms of career, in terms of politics, in terms of morality, in terms of larger truths. So this is a very interesting one in that Saturn rising in Saturn in the first house in Taurus would like there to be simple truths and standards. And yet Jupiter opposite in Scorpio suggests Jupiter, called guru in Sanskrit or Hindi, means that there are disturbing teachers from the outside, that the sort of inherent desire to nail things down is contrasted to a certain degree by ideas and things that are maybe more complex and more challenging.
These disturbing teachers are on drugs. It's conjunct Neptune. I mean, or they're deluded.
He took back the projection a long time ago. He's a healthy drug addict who owns his whole chart. Don't be smirch, Nicholas. But Nick, of course, being a sun in Gemini, a dualistic sign, is inherently equipped to deal with contradictions.
Well, he's also inherently equipped to deal with denial and escapism, I think. Well,
and
no.
the Saturn-Venus conjunction.
Well, it's the Saturn.
He's guilty. I don't care who did it.
Well, he may be guilty, except that Saturn moves. You know, it's Saturn in Taurus, but now we have the Venus in Gemini and the Mercury in Gemini, and they're trying the Uranus in Aries Libra, which is trying the Moon in Aquarius. So we really have this grand trine with these additional harmonious sextiles. Look at all this air. Moon, air, Aquarius. Mars, air, Aquarius. North Node, air, Aquarius. Air, air, Sun, air, Gemini, and Uranus. And so there's this ability, I think, that Nicholas has, that no matter how crazy the teacher is or deluded, no matter how crazy or deluded he is, no matter what he's guilty for doing, whether he did it or not, he's guilty, you know, as Jeff said, it all doesn't matter because Nicholas gets to go home and turn on his TV. And once he's in his own space, his internal self-referential grand trine in air intellect goes into bzzz, and it doesn't matter what's going on out there, you can make it work. You're comfortable in your own space. It doesn't mean other people are comfortable in your own space, but you have the ability, and I don't know whether it's escape really, it's a place that you get to work, and this is the good news and bad news about a grand trine. Historically, a grand trine is considered to be the greatest blessing of a chart because it's luck, things work. But it also makes it difficult for one to break out of their own patterns because you can change your job, you can change your career, you can leave home, you can, you can execute those who are bugging you, who are too much in your face. You go to prison and you got the exact same issues, and you turn on the TV and you're still okay. It's your same stuff. Nothing's changed. And so it's frustrating sometimes, even with the tensions that are here in the chart. And there are some good ones, and certainly that Pluto square Sun, which maybe you want to say something about. There's some good tensions that help you break out of stuff, but I think it's frustrating sometimes that what Nietzsche called eternal recurrence, or Edna St. Vincent Millay wrote, life is not one thing after another, it's the same damn thing over and over again. And I think that you get some of that. Well,
It's not the same thing over and over again.
But
Edna.
Anyhow, that's.
This is a Cheshire cat chart. I mean, Taurus.
He says over there, grinning.
How are you? That's the Taurus rising modality. I'm fine. I'm cool. And then he's got Pluto square the sun. He's undressing all of your souls in his mind.
And his hand's on his knife in his pocket.
Right, right. And the other thing that's so interesting is all of this energy here in part of the chart that's extremely personal. And yet the moon, the most personal planet in the chart, is elevated in a public area and in the most impersonal sign, Aquarius. So there's a very interesting dance around here, I think, around Nicholas, as Nicholas, and Nicholas as part of a community or as part of other ways of seeing himself. And I'm not saying one direction or the other is preferable, but it's kind of an interesting thing. And one last thing, at least from my perspective, South Node in Leo often feels the need to be the hero, or feels that I'm the hub. You know, even if they don't know it, I'm the one who keeps the Earth spinning on its axis, and I got to take care of that. And a North Node in Aquarius is being a spoke. It's recognizing that you are in a wheel or in part of a system that contains other elements and other parts of it, and that you can get help. You can get support.
Exactly conjunct Mars.
Well, that's a little paradoxical because Mars likes to do things itself, and yet Aquarius is a collective sign. So that's too weird for me to understand, and when I'm older, explain it to me.
I am learning the spoke part, and I'm realizing one of the benefits is a little less drama. So, you know,
Well, I think that's a goal of the Sun square Pluto in general, is learning how to move through the drama without as much drama.
pretty much, yeah. Like just 'cause, and space, lots of space. I say that because of, you know, what you said about, you know, when I get home, and the space there, everything is cool. But as long as I have that, everything will be crazy on the outside. As long as I come back home and I have my little, the thing is, sometimes days go by, I go, oh, I should actually maybe open the door.
I have the feeling that when you're home alone, you're as plugged into the world as somebody who lives in the middle of Manhattan. That with an elevated moon in Aquarius, your antenna is very high up on the hill and very open to a wide range
Good
of
image,
frequencies.
high up on the hill. Good
Yeah,
image.
with a wide range of frequencies. What hill do you get high on? Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you all for coming here to Soul Food tonight. Thank you for Rick on his birthday.
And thank you, Jeff, and thank you all.
And thank for
Thank you, Julie, the other Julie, for dealing with our sound and lights. Soul Foods. Yeah, thank you, Craig and Lily and Soul Foods for hosting us, and thank anyone else that anyone can think of.